Peter's decision was hasty, and his reaction was a bit extra, as was usually the case for him. He agreed to allow Jesus to wash his feet and offered to let him wash his hands and his head as well. Jesus' response kind of demonstrates what we've been talking about. He says, I don't need to wash your hands and your head. You can handle that on your own. Nobody that takes a bath needs to have anything washed except for their feet. What I need to do is put my hands on the things you can't get to yourself.
Okay.
You can wash your hands, you can wash it. What you can't do is your feet. So you take care of the stuff you can. I will put my hands on the mess of the things that you can't quite take care of if you'll let me. This is the law of power, this is the law of responsibility. If you'll let me, if you'll open up your fences, if you'll let the bad out and the good in, I will step in. But if you push back, then I'm not going to be able to, and you're not going to be prepared for what I've got coming next. Jesus was there to tend to what they could not clean on their own. He humbled himself to take responsibility for addressing the deficiencies and inadequacies that were beyond their capability. In allowing his feet to be washed, Peter exercises the law of power, submits his inabilities to the power of he who is most able. Although over 2,000 years have passed since this incident, here's the real object lesson of the matter. The human tendency to deny God access to the areas of our person that are most desperately in need of attention remains unchanged. So just like Peter didn't want Jesus touching his feet, we have a tendency not to allow Jesus access to the things about ourselves that we have failed time and time again to fix, to clean. We don't want him putting his hands on that. He can put his hands on things in the periphery, but when it comes to the stuff that's really messy, we don't want him touching it. There was a time in the history of the American Protestant Church where foot washing ceremonies were a part of your normal observational communion service. Over the course of the last 20 years, most churches have abandoned the practice of foot washing because some believers have become increasingly uncomfortable with it.
Really?
Some are uncomfortable with the notion of washing other people's feet because it's unsanitary, sometimes unpleasant. These folks don't put lotion on their feet. They don't clip their toenails. They got fun. It smells. I don't want to wash nobody's feet. I don't really see where I need to do that. God don't expect it. It wasn't an ordinance. That was something Jesus decided to do, and I don't have to do it. It ain't got nothing to do with salvation. Other people don't want their feet washed because they've got deformities. They got ugly feet. They got bunions. They got corns, and I don't want nobody washing my feet. I don't want to expose any of that to anybody else. Keep your hands off my feet. That's my business. Nobody else needs to see it. And so we've gotten away from foot washing, which there's nothing necessarily really wrong with, except for the fact that it ever became an issue to begin with. We have our boundaries, and if you don't want me touching your feet, I'm not going to push you to let me touch your feet. And if I don't want to touch somebody's feet, nobody should make me feel guilty for not having to do it. The problem is that it is symptomatic of a much deeper spiritual boundary problem. The same wall that makes us uncomfortable exposing our feet to one another also makes us uncomfortable allowing God access to the parts that only he can clean. I don't want anybody else seeing what's wrong with me. I don't want anybody else touching, speaking to, dealing with the things that have kept me messy for my entire life. I don't want anybody else getting in my business and telling me what I need to do. I've got my own boundaries, and you don't need to be in my business anyway. The same thing that has kept people from wanting their feet out there with the corns, with the calluses, with the crooked toenails, with everything else, is the same thing that keeps them from allowing God to put his hands on their mess. I got you in 1 second. It makes us uncomfortable confessing our faults to one another so that way God can help us overcome them. God's not too proud to put his hands on our messy parts, but we are often too proud to allow him. We don't want our issues exposed to the world, but more importantly, we don't want our issues to be exposed to ourselves. I don't want to look at them, and if you get too close to it, that means you looking at them, which means I got to look at them, and I don't want to confront it. And we set up our walls. We set up our boundaries. The same things that make us worried about what somebody going to think about the way my feet look has us worried about what people are going to think about the fact that I don't have it all together right now.